Alright, this one's going to be a controversial doozy. Critical Role, how to improve it to make it watchable.
There's the first tomato, there it flies. Okay, oh, dodge.
Yeah. Don't tap on me with your finger.
Okay, I think we should put some caveats on this, right?
We need a bit of a disclaimer.
Yeah.
This video is not about how Matt Mercer is as a DM. This is not how the characters play. This has got nothing to do with their storytelling. This is purely about how the future of the broadcasting and showing of role-playing games can be improved. So we encourage you, instead of sending hate mail to hate@questgivers.com, rather put it in the comment sections below if you agree with us or disagree with us. And if you disagree with us, say why. And if you have further ideas that we haven't talked about, for God's sakes, tell us in the argument section below. Plenty of people will obviously, be watching this video and they'll have plenty to say, I'm sure. Why are you and I making this video?
Because I think that there's a lot of untapped value that can be added to the game, because one thing is, I'm not a huge fan of watching. It's not that I'm the target audience, and Gareth and I are the target audience. It's not like we don't want to watch. It's just that it's hard to watch because, in my opinion, there's not certain value added, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The kind of value added that you can put in the streams that will really make it watchable, I think, for many more people than just us RPG geeks.
We're old school hardcore role players, right? So of course we are the target audience. Then we'll say, well, maybe it skews younger and all that kind of thing. But we all consume Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, the Marvel universe, the DC universe. If someone is actually watching, but we are the target audience. So we want to just throw in there a few things that we feel like that would attract us more to what's actually going on. Now, we have tried to watch episodes, and we're not just talking Critical Role here. We're talking a wide swath of games. But we're using Critical Role as an example because it's the one that everyone knows and most people would watch. Firstly, it's about how the content is being presented to us as an audience. You need to have a thing where you're taking cues from other media, other things that present content of this style that have been doing it for a long time, and utilizing that into improving the watchability. And we're not talking about quality here, because again, they know what they're doing in terms of actually playing. That's not what we're talking about. Here we're talking about something like, if you look at, for instance, televised sport, this is very, very similar. You've got a highly engaged audience that don't play the game. 90% of the people watching American football or baseball or cricket or rugby or whatever you play, wherever you are, 90% of those people don't play the game, but they watch the game. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, what features of those make it a more entertaining, watchable experience?
Well, yeah, I think the sports analogy is a great analogy, because a commentator really does that value added to the game, right? For an example, when Critical Role did their boss fight with Vecna, and Matt Colville was like narrating, telling you what happened while they were playing and everything, I love that episode, because you got to hear, he was talking about the audience, how they were reacting, how he was reacting, and it really drew you in. And I think that's one thing that's really missing from these, high value streams. And Critical Role is one of those streams that can afford to do this kind of thing. Have a commentator that's like Matt Colville, somebody excited about the game, somebody who wants to give you stats and that kind of thing. And that, to me, really made the game, it drew me into the game more, actually, and kind of centered me in the game, instead of just, trying to piece all the things together myself, and which it does with a sports game also.
A sports game, when you're watching it, a lot of the times there's not a hell of a lot going on. The ball's moving around and people are running backwards and forwards. But what happens when you add the commentator in, that adds context, and oftentimes the enthusiasm of the commentator adds more excitement to what's actually happening. And that's, we feel, is something that's a little bit lacking. Now, of course, there are problems with adding a commentator into a role-playing game, but that's a problem that can be solved. It's not something that's, impossible to do. I watched the whole video of Matt Colville doing a rundown breakdown of what was happening in it. Him describing what was happening was more exciting than when I went back and watched it. I was thinking, this is fantastic. Finally, something that's like worth watching. And I start watching it and it's nothing like what he's describing. Yes, I can see the nuances of what he was picking up, but if that was overlaid over the top of what's happening, you've got what you wanted in the one video happening at the same time as what you were watching. That's a really, really, really great example. Now, the next one we talked about was dice rolling. Now, this we've seen in a few broadcasts.
Yeah, that's the kind of cool thing about dice, because it's that luck, it's that chance that you bring into the game. Is this going to work? Is it not? Or is it partially going to work? Or what's going to happen? And that's always exciting in the game. There are points in the game where you're waiting to see what happens on the dice. And to actually see the dice roll is amazing. And that's one thing I do in my games. Like, I don't hide my dice play when I'm DMing. I don't hide it from my players. I show them because it's as exciting to them as it is to me. Actually, probably more exciting to them. And I would love to see the players' dice rolls, and the DM's dice rolls or the Game Master's dice rolls in the game. So I think that, I think that would be another value-added thing that they could, easily add to the game, with some dice cams and that kind of thing.
Players' reaction to what they've rolled. Currently, you see their reaction, but you don't actually know what they rolled unless they vocalize what they rolled. But to see it visually on the screen, there's the roll, and cut to the reaction of the player, that the psychological thing of playing a game is added to the audience experience, because the audience wants to be a part of that experience, and we're kind of being left out because we're not getting the whole picture. And this brings me to the next point. It's like, if you watch a game like poker on the internet or on ESPN or whatever. Poker is a game of people sitting around most of the time not talking about the game at all. The game's just happening, and everyone is kind of like deadpan and staring at one another, and sometimes they're not talking at all. That has a commentator that's kind of telling you what's happening, what the odds are, and all that kind of stuff. But the other interesting thing there is poker gives the audience information that the rest of the players don't know, or the DM doesn't know, or any of these sort of things. So you can do that by having a camera on the character sheet of the player. Now, when the player's interacting with the character sheet, you have information that's not necessarily always seen. They like to put up like armor class and hit points and things like that. You're not getting the full picture. You're not seeing the character sheet where they've forgotten the fact that they've got a +1 sword of goblin slaying. People are screaming out, my God, man, use the +1 sword. When you see people shouting at the TV in football games and baseball games and whatever, it's because of this unknown information. If the player knew what the audience knew, and that builds up this sort of tension and excitement. Will they realize that they have the +1 goblin slaying sword? It's little things like this that make a big difference to the watchability of the show. Another thing we talked about is players commenting on their thoughts on what's happening.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Like what Gareth was saying with the sheets, it's like, yeah, you have this information in front of you. You can use that. That's just so great. So they can feed information to the commentator. You could have them text information. Oh, I think I might cast it, because as a situation is developed, it could be fun for the commentator to say, oh, the paladin is thinking about casting, the smite on this next enemy, or, whatever kind of spell or bless on on these characters or whatever, to just get them out of the situation, that kind of thing. So whatever the character's thinking, they could text it to the commentator, or even just have it come up on the screen like a crawl, right? And you can see you can see what the characters are thinking. That's just like another level that you're actually getting into the heads of the players, which I think is really fun, a really fun aspect.
And again, it comes back to they don't realize they have the Goblin +1 sword. They might go, I'm going to cast a Bless spell, and someone else goes, no, you've got XYZ spell. That's infinitely better than Bless in this situation. I'm not a big sports fan, but I like watching certain things. My favorite sport to watch is American football. I've never played American football. I don't live in America. I like the strategy of what's happening in that game more so than I do in games that I've played, which is rugby, hockey, tennis, and a wide range of other things. I don't find those exciting as, American football. There's a huge strategy to what's happening. So I liken that to D&D. There's a lot of thinking and planning and doing that happens in the game that can benefit from a sort of a person who's well versed in the game, like a Matt Colville or someone like that, who can bring that value to it. And you find it in poker as well. People who are very good poker players commenting on poker games that are happening and the nuances and the psychology of, it's critical now whether he's got 3 hit points, that he's really thinking more about healing than he's thinking about damage. Has he realized that he's so low? She's only got 1 spell slot left. Will using this magic spell mean that we're coming to an impasse here where the dragon is going to be able to take the upper hand?
Terrain is sorely missing from the game. It wouldn't necessarily have to be terrain. It could be a visual, a map or whatever, with tokens on it or that kind of thing. Ideally, it's terrain because that's just visual in itself, right? Some streams have played with this kind of thing, some successfully, some not. When I first started doing some of my streams, I just pointed the camera at the table and you just saw the terrain and stuff, and that's not really satisfying either. You got to see these other elements that we're talking about. You got to see all this at once. But if you can see that terrain, we like the terrain because it plants you somewhere. It makes everybody instantly on the same page. You don't have to keep explaining where so-and-so elf is and dwarf is. You see in the terrain where it is, and if you had like a nice camera set up, with it, where the camera maybe even moved and that kind of thing, and got different angles, and you could see where everybody is and the location of the monsters and that kind of thing. That's a huge value added. Now I know when they did their final video with the Vecna, they used some terrain and stuff like that, but it's not a common thing that they do. It's not all the time. For us terrain people, we commonly use it in combats, and it's really just gets everybody on the same page quickly, visually, because it's visual. It's visual and you can see where everything is. And I think it would do the same thing in a stream. It just, instead of having to explain where everybody is over and over again, when people forget, it's just instantly a reference for everyone, including the people who are watching and the players. And not only that, it's just a nice visual element, right? It just looks good. It's like that campfire that you all watch when you tell the ghost stories around. It's something to look at, something interesting to look at. I think that all streams could be improved by doing, anything with terrain and that kind of thing.
If I were watching American football, would I prefer to watch it or listen to it on radio or watch it on TV? I'd prefer to watch it on TV. And I think 90% of the people would agree with me there. But this is why the visual aspect, it's a visual medium. And yes, they've used terrain, but usually it's far back. So the miniatures are like this big on the screen. You can't see the miniatures. It needs to be right up. The miniature needs to be as big as me on the screen. That's the kind of, excitement. We're right into the terrain. You can see every little bit of things that are happening there. Yes, they've got terrain. Like Matt Colville's first broadcast, they had terrain. There was this wonderful gate structure there that you saw from above and you saw from the front, but at a distance. You didn't get the feel for the amount of time and effort that was put into that. Like, for God's sake, put the camera closer.
Yeah, that's can be a problem with Acquisitions Incorporated. They have that big terrain piece set up, which is fantastically, modeled, but it's like way back on the stage. It's like you can't really see it anyway. But with today with the technology, you can have those little cameras that can go into it. You could have just somebody dedicated to setting this up and having a little camera move around the terrain and show you all this stuff. That is just next level stuff, and that would just make it so accessible for for other people, to understand what's going on and just enjoy the broadcast.
Like if my mother was watching that game, she'd have no idea who's what, when, where, and how. She'd just have no idea. So if you take it from an ordinary person watching it, how compelling is it to an ordinary viewer who doesn't know the game? How much does it engage those people? At the moment, it does not. Because if it's not engaging people who actually enjoy doing that kind of thing, like people who play American football, I'm pretty sure they enjoy watching American football, right? That's powerful. We want the same experience. We want to watch amazing role-playing games on the internet, on television, on all kinds of media. And that's really what this is about. Making it watchable for an average audience. And that's going to bring more people into the hobby. More people came into the hobby by watching other people play D&D on shows like Big Bang Theory and Community. They saw this experience happening. Now that is in a visual medium where you're kind of seeing an edited portrayal of what's happening, right? But then when you watch a live actual game happening, that's a different story because it's not what you're expecting from those things. So you get a huge fall off of people. When you take a stream, obviously there's a live stream, you've got 25,000, 40,000, 50,000 people watching, right? There's a lot of things that happen in a live stream that are just going to be complex and complicated. But once that's done and you're going to dump it on YouTube or you're going to dump it into some other video format, edit it. Cut out the boring stuff. A competent editor could improve the watchability astronomically. And I'm not saying that the people who are handling the live broadcast are bad. That's not what I'm saying, because I know how complicated it is to run something like that. And it's, hats off to them for being able to do this week in and week out. The things we're talking about obviously will add layers of complexity, layers of difficulty. But I think as a flagship show that you're going to set the standard for what this stuff should be going forward, that's how you make Critical Role more watchable.
And as many fans as they have now, they could double that. They could double the amount of people watching it or more by just doing these things. So imagine, the sports analogy I think is great. Imagine watching any sports, American Ninja, basketball, football, anything without all the other layers they put on there, right? So without the commentary, without the stats, without, the close-ups, without all that stuff. Take that out and just set a camera up and you just watch the sport. You're probably not gonna be that excited watching it, right? It's all that other I call it value-added stuff that takes it to the next level and makes it so exciting. And I think Gareth and I think that you can do that with shows, especially like Critical Role, that has a good budget that could actually do this kind of thing. If
you take it from a film history and a TV history standpoint, we're in like the 1950s of broadcasting for role-playing games. We need to bring it up to speed.
In the early days of motion pictures, they just did the whole proscenium arch like it was a play. Like they didn't edit, they didn't, they just set the camera up, cranked it, and then had the actors act like they were on a stage. And that was not the way for motion pictures. It was when they did the movie, a movie called The Great Train Robbery, where they started intercutting and that kind of thing, and realizing you can do close-ups and you can do, time lapse, and you can do all these other things to make it so much more exciting. And I think we need to get away from that proscenium arch mentality and get to adding the value-added stuff to these streams.
Well, in film history terms, we're talking about A Man with a Movie Camera, which was a Russian constructivist film. If you watch it now, it looks like a modern video, because if you look at all the other movies that were being produced in America and whatever, this one had modern editing styles and modern camera movements. It was way ahead of its time. And this is what we're talking about. You got to take, everyone's doing the same thing, and it's time that someone, and it's better that it's a show that has a lot of influence, it's better that show does it, because that will influence everyone else to raise the bar so it becomes something that everyone in the world can enjoy and not just a handful of people.
Right, exactly. And like Gareth and I have said at the beginning of the stream, these people are extremely talented, and this would just enhance their talent. It would just make it that much more enjoyable and that much more watchable to do these kind of things to modify the stream. So yeah, I think that we should move forward with this kind of thinking, advanced thinking, as this art form has become more and more sophisticated.
Not that we're super sophisticated. We're just two guys on the opposite side of the world that are speaking in the same room. Who are these guys to talk about this shit?
Yeah, who are you? What are you doing? He's like,
who are these guys? And with that, we'll see you next Friday.
Hey, thanks guys for watching. Make sure to check out questgivers.com for our system agnostic modules. Great stuff. We also have our Kickstarter September 1st, video every Friday. So check us out and make sure to comment below. We want to know what you think about these ideas. Is this just shite, or are these really cool ideas that should be implemented? So we hope to hear from you. Oh God, have they shot at us yet?